Hello, fellow readers. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Christine, and I like to read. I like to read a lot of dark and disturbing things, but I do kind of dabble in some other genres as well. Like today, I am going to be discussing a literary fiction book called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I know this book was nominated and won things like Book of the Year for Book of the Month, and I know that they were nominated, and I believe they won in Goodreads. And so I thought I would just weigh in on this and see what we think. So let's get into it. So when I saw this book up as a Book of the Month pick a few months ago, it was an instant pick for me, even though it's not my genre of books that I normally read, because I saw a blurb that it was about video game developers, and I have considered myself a gamer pretty much since I was young, and so that really interested me. So I'm going to talk about the things that I liked, the things I didn't like, and then kind of wrap up if I felt like this was worth Book of the Year. So first of all, what this book is about is two friends named Sam and Sadie, and they meet when they are about 10 years old in a hospital. So Sadie has a sister who is battling cancer, so she spends a lot of time in the hospital visiting her sister and kind of wandering the halls, that kind of thing. And Sam is there as a patient having multiple reconstructive surgeries on his leg and his foot from an accident that he was in. And they meet in like a little play area that the hospital has for children that has a Nintendo set up in there. And so they just start playing video games together, and they really just click and become good friends. And it turns out that Sam hasn't spoken to anyone for 6 weeks since his accident. And so Sadie kind of is able to bring him to speak again and to start enjoying life a little bit. So even though Sadie's sister is now doing better and doesn't spend time in the hospital anymore, Sadie still continues to have her parents drop her off so she can hang out with Sam and, play video games together and just be friends. But about a year after this, they have a bit of a falling out and they stop speaking to each other. And I thought it was kind of not funny, but interesting the way that Sam decides he's so angry at Sadie that he's going to call her a word that he knows will just end this friendship. And it is the C word. And I just thought that the little blurb on this was kind of amusing, because at least here in America, that word is just like, you don't use that word unless you mean business. And I know that it's like kind of tossed around in other countries and it's kind of just a throwaway word. It doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot, but here that word, like if you want to upset a woman, you will call her that word. So he calls her that word, and like friendship over. They stop speaking, that's it. And then we kind of fast forward 10 years or so, and they haven't spoken this whole time. They both go to college on the other side of the country, and they just so happen to run into each other outside a train station, and they start talking again and just kind of start up their friendship again. And it turns out that Sadie is at MIT and she is trying to learn how to develop games, and she is making games through her class, and she gives him a copy of her game, and it just gets them back into this friendship, and they decide to make a game together. So this book is basically following them over 30 years of friendship and working together, and their successes, and their just going through their life over the 30 years that they know each other. So some of the things that I really enjoyed about this book, especially in the beginning, is the first thing that I really identify with is that they're showing Sadie from when she is in college, and she's pretty much one of just two females in a male-dominated program, field of interest, and just the way that she is treated and how she has to prove herself as a female. I think even if, like, I don't have a background of being like a computer programmer or video game designer or anything like that, but I think that probably most of us have felt this way at some point in our lives, where as the female, no matter how smart you are, no matter how good you are, whether it's in sports or academics, you feel like even if you are one of the best, you're still a female one of the best. You're never quite as good as your male counterpart, or you're good for a girl. And just her having to kind of deal with her gender in this time being something that just kind of makes it more difficult. Another obstacle for her is just by being female. So I really did enjoy this part of the story. I felt like I could identify with it. The next thing I really love is just the video games. This is in part a love letter to video games in general. And growing up, when I was about 4 years old, my family had an Intellivision set. And probably a lot of you have never heard of that. I'm gonna try to put a picture up here so you can see what it's like. And I played the heck out of that thing. I loved games like Shark, Lock and Chase, Dungeons and Dragons. This is really what started my love for video games. And then of course, as Nintendo consoles became so popular in the 80s when they came out, pretty much everybody had one, and I lived off of that thing. And video games have followed me throughout my life. There have definitely been times where I haven't played as much, but it has always been a constant, kind of like reading in my life. I've always done both, sometimes more than others, but yeah, so I really just loved this love letter to video games, and video games as expressing yourself as a form of art. And I loved it. I love the nods to all the different games throughout time. And I think it helped that I kind of grew up in the same era that they did, where we went from having nothing, or from a very young age, to having these things readily available, and just watching through the 90s, especially how the technology exploded and things got so much better, and the graphics really games went from being on this little tiny cartridge that you couldn't even save to having these huge like discfuls of games that went on for 100 hours plus. And I loved it. So I could see, if you were not into video games at all, that this would probably not be interesting to read about, and it might be a put off for this story, but I, for one, absolutely loved it. So there are also some topics that this book explores, and some of them make my liked list and some of them make my dislike list. I think Sam as a character had a lot going on for him, and there were parts that I really liked. He is of mixed race, and so it really kind of explores how you never feel 100% part of any culture when you have, mixed genetics like that, where you feel like you don't fully 100% belong in any like category or culture, and we tend to put people into slots, and if you don't really fit that, then you feel like you don't belong anywhere. So he does have that going for him, or going against him. He also has, he lives with his grandparents, and he grows up most of his life with his grandparents. So he is living without his parents, and he also has a physical disability, and that is due to an accident, and that's why we see him in the hospital. And this is something that plagues him throughout his entire life and through this whole story. And I felt like this was really well done. We really explored a lot of the challenges that he faced, both mentally and physically, with having to grow up with this and deal with this his whole life. And this disability that basically causes him to make certain decisions in life that are life-changing for him and the people around him, but he has to do what is best for this situation. So I did really enjoy how they, even though he had I felt like he had a lot of baggage to deal with, I like that he was representing something that I don't see all that often in books, especially in younger people. So it was interesting to read about, and I did really like that depth to this character. There are also situations with Sadie, especially when she is in college, and I'm going to try to word this in a way that doesn't spoil anything, but I really felt like, but she enters in a romantic relationship with somebody, and I use that term loosely, but she is basically mentally abused and physically abused in this relationship. I think it spoke a lot how she blamed herself for being in the situation in the first place, and she took 100% blame and put it on herself. And I feel like a lot of people can identify with that, as well as when it comes time to walk away or to try to break up with somebody, and she knows that she has to not put any emotion into it because she does not want to affect this at her college, as her reputation as a worker in this industry at all. And she knows that if she makes a big fuss about something that isn't right, even though she rightfully should be able to make a big fuss about it, she can't, because it's only going to hurt her in the end. And I also think a lot of women have been in this position before, and I felt like that really added some depth to her character and made her more believable. Another thing that I really liked in this book was there was a whole chapter called NPC, which, if in gamer speak, stands for non-playable character. We get to experience a chapter in a way that I never have before, and I won't go too much into detail because I feel like that's a spoiler. But I did like the whole idea of this character basically taking on the role of an NPC, and even though he's not, he was very much a part of the story. He was very much a character in the story, but within Sam and Sadie's world, he always felt like he was just this NPC and gets called this at some point. So I did really enjoy that part. And there is another whole chapter in the book that is basically being told from within a game. And I think that people are either going to love that or hate it, but I thought it was interesting. I thought it kind of shook things up a little bit. It definitely fit the story, and I thought it was a fun addition to this book. So on to the things that I didn't 100% love. I felt like there was a lot of political events that happened in this time period to these people. And I understand that we are spanning 30 years, and a lot happens in 30 years, a lot of very significant things that are going on, but it seemed like they all happened to them, and I felt like it was a bit much. You could only throw so much at these characters and have us care and have us believe this, you know what I mean? It felt like they were kind of added in there as political commentary, and even though I agreed with their points of view, it felt a little bit preachy, or it just felt like unnecessary, and it stuck out kind of like a sore thumb sometimes, where I felt like it wasn't really part of the story. We just wanted to add this detail in, and to me, it detracted from the story. Another thing that I didn't 100% love was we spent some time bringing other characters into their lives, like people that they work with, which understandably, right, you're going to have friendships with other people in your life over 30 years. But I felt like we started focusing on those characters instead of our main character, Sam and Sadie, when we needed to have that constant Sam and Sadie throughout the story. So there's times where they are not the best of friends. I don't think that's a big spoiler, but their friendship, kind of like a roller coaster, goes up and down. They go apart, they draw back together, they do work together. So things will happen over time. But I felt like we started bringing in new characters just so we can have some of those political statements that I was making before. And I felt like it took away from the story. I did not find it completely believable when Sam and Sadie weren't friends and would go long periods of time not talking or being friends. And to me, I think if they had taken out those parts of the book and just focused on this friendship, then we would have gotten a little bit more out of it. I would have felt a little bit more emotionally invested into their story, as opposed to bringing in other things that are going on in their life. So as a wrap up, our characters are very flawed. They're very stubborn. They both make mistakes. And I mean, that's true to life. And I did like to see this friendship. I loved that it was about video games. I don't see that very often, but I loved that it was treated as an expression of art, and it meant a lot to me. Was it the best book I read or the best book that came out in 2022? I don't know about that. While this was very good, I don't think it was excellent. I ended up rating it 4 out of 5 stars. I think it had the potential to be there, but some of the flaws kind of took me out of the story or made it seem not 100% believable to me. And I know that this book gets a lot of mixed reviews because after I read it, I started reading what people had to say about it. And a lot of people had pretty mediocre reviews about this. And I think a big thing is going to be if you like video games or not. And do you believe this character's story 100%? Are you 100% emotionally invested in these characters? I was almost there, but I wanted a little bit more. I felt like I just needed a little bit more. But overall, I think it was a good story and I enjoyed it. 4 out of 5 stars. So let me know, have you read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin? By the way, I do really like this cover. I know a lot of people don't, but this wave art has a story within this book and it makes sense why it is used. And I really like the rainbow. So if you have read this book, I would like to hear your thoughts and if you agree or disagree, and maybe I will get something out of this that you got after I hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching and stay spooky.